The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland of Kepler 442b, carrying ice crystals sharp enough to cut through metal. Dr. Sarah Chen pulled her thermal suit tighter as she checked the readings on her scanner for the third time in 10 minutes. The numbers hadn't changed. The temperature had dropped another 5 degrees, now sitting at -47 Celsius, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. 3 months. That's how long she'd been alone on this godforsaken iceball, manning Research Station Omega while the rest of her team had evacuated due to equipment failures. Sarah knew better. The Galactic Council had pulled funding from the human research programs, leaving Earth scientists stranded on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. She was just stubborn enough to stay behind and continue her work on extremophile bacteria, even if it meant facing the brutal winter season alone. The communication array crackled to life, startling her from her thoughts. Static filled the small laboratory, followed by a voice she didn't recognize. The speaker was clearly not human. The vocal patterns were too rhythmic, too melodic, like a song being hummed underwater. Human vessel. This is Captain Zethkar of the hegemony cruiser Silent Dawn. We are experiencing critical system failures. Our ship is falling apart and we need immediate assistance. Sarah stared at the communications panel. The hegemony, she knew that name. They were one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, the same organization that had abandoned human colonies across the galaxy. The same aliens who had voted to classify humanity as too primitive for full membership, relegating them to observer status and cutting off vital resources. She could ignore the call. Let them freeze in the void like they'd left humans to freeze on worlds like this one. It would be justice in a way. But Sarah had become a scientist to help people, not to let them die out of spite. Her finger hovered over the response button. This is Dr. Sarah Chen at Research Station Omega. What's your situation? Relief flooded the alien's voice. Doctor, our ship's life support is failing. We have 17 crew members aboard, and our heating systems have completely shut down. We detected your research station and changed course, hoping for sanctuary. Sarah looked around her small facility. The station was barely large enough for 2 humans, let alone 17 aliens. The power grid was already strained, keeping just her alive during the storm. And if these were hegemony military, they might just take what they needed and leave her to die. How long until you reach my position? She asked. 6 hours, assuming our engines don't fail completely. 6 hours. Sarah ran calculations in her head. The storm was supposed to last another 14 hours, maybe longer. Even if she shared everything, food, water, heat, oxygen, there wasn't enough to keep everyone alive until it passed. Captain Zethkar, I need to be honest with you. This station isn't equipped for multiple occupants during a storm like this. I'm not sure I can help all of your crew. There was a long pause. When the alien spoke again, his voice was quieter, more subdued. We understand the situation, Doctor. Any assistance you can provide would be more than we deserve. More than they deserved. Sarah frowned. That wasn't the kind of language she expected from a proud hegemony captain. Usually they demanded help as if it were owed to them. Why do you say that? Another pause, longer this time. Because we know what the Council did to your people. We know about the abandoned colonies, the cut funding, the classification vote. I was there when they decided humanity wasn't worth the resources to support. Sarah felt anger flare in her chest. And you went along with it. I did. The admission was simple, without excuses. I believed the propaganda about human inferiority. I thought your species was too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with advanced technology. I was wrong. The honesty surprised her. In 3 years of dealing with Galactic Council members, she'd never heard one admit to being wrong about anything, especially regarding humanity. What changed your mind? We've been watching human colonies for the past year, Doctor. Watching how your people respond to abandonment and hardship. Other species panic, fight amongst themselves, collapse into chaos when resources become scarce. Humans adapt. They innovate. They survive against impossible odds while helping their neighbors do the same. Sarah pulled up the sensor readings as the alien spoke. She could see their ship now. A massive cruiser that should have been able to weather any storm. But the heat signatures were wrong. Entire sections of the vessel were dark and cold. What happened to your ship? Sabotage. The word came out like a curse. There are factions within the hegemony that believe humans should be eliminated entirely, not just ignored. When they learned that I had been questioning our policies toward your species, they arranged for certain systems to fail during our patrol route through this sector. So they were both outcasts now. The thought should have given Sarah some satisfaction, but instead she felt a strange kinship with these aliens flying through the void toward her station. I'm transmitting landing coordinates. There's a maintenance bay that can accommodate a ship your size, but you'll need to work fast. The storm is getting worse. Doctor, I must ask, why are you helping us? After everything the Council has done to humanity? Sarah looked out the porthole at the swirling snow and ice. In the distance, she could see the faint lights of silent dawn growing brighter as it approached through the storm. 17 beings who were about to learn what it meant to depend on human compassion. Because that's what humans do, she said simply. We help even when we shouldn't, even when it's not smart, especially when it's not deserved. She began preparing the station for guests, her mind racing through survival calculations. It was going to be a very long night, and morning was far from guaranteed. But if these aliens wanted to learn what humanity was really capable of, they were about to get a first-hand education. The ship's lights grew brighter against the storm, and Sarah wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or if she was about to prove once and for all that humans deserved their place among the stars. The silent dawn settled into the maintenance bay with a grinding sound that made Sarah's teeth ache. Through the reinforced windows of the bay, she could see frost forming on the ship's hull within seconds of landing. Whatever had damaged their heating systems had done a thorough job. The airlock cycled, and Sarah got her first look at Captain Zethkar. He was tall, maybe 7 feet, with 4 arms and skin that shifted from deep blue to pale silver depending on the angle of the light. His crew followed behind him, a mix of species she recognized from council records. All of them looked exhausted, and several were shivering despite their thermal gear. Dr. Chen, Zethkar said, his voice carrying better in person than over the radio. I cannot express how grateful we are for your assistance. Save the thanks until we're all alive tomorrow, Sarah replied, already running mental calculations. 17 aliens plus herself. Limited food supplies and a power grid that was going to be pushed past its breaking point. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. How many of your crew need medical attention? A smaller alien with feathers instead of hair stepped forward. I am Chief Medical Officer Veltar. 3 of our crew are suffering from hypothermia, and 2 have injuries from when the sabotage caused explosions in our engineering section. Sarah nodded and led them through the station. Medical bay is this way. It's designed for human physiology, but the basic equipment should work for most species. She paused at a junction in the corridor. Captain, I need to ask, do any of your crew pose a security risk? I'm trusting you with my life here, but I need to know if that trust is misplaced. Zethkar's skin shifted to a deeper blue, which Sarah had learned indicated strong emotion in his species. Doctor, I give you my word that no harm will come to you from my crew. We are the ones in debt here. The medical bay was cramped with 5 beings inside it, but Veltar worked efficiently. Sarah was impressed by how quickly the alien doctor adapted to unfamiliar equipment. She'd worked with Galactic Council medical personnel before, and they usually spent hours complaining about primitive human technology before deigning to use it. Your equipment is quite ingenious, Veltar commented while treating a crew member with frostbitten appendages. Very efficient design. We could learn from this, Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's not what the Council usually says about human technology. The Council is wrong about many things. The medical officer's voice was matter-of-fact. Without any hint of the usual Council superiority, I've reviewed human medical journals. Your trauma surgery techniques are actually superior to ours in many situations. While Veltar worked, Sarah gathered the rest of the crew in the station's main chamber. It wasn't designed to hold this many people, but it was the only space large enough. She pulled up the station's environmental controls on her tablet. Here's our situation, she began, displaying the power consumption data. This station is designed to support 2 humans for 6 months during winter conditions. We currently have 18 beings consuming resources at a much higher rate. The storm outside is going to last at least 12 more hours, possibly longer. One of the aliens, a reptilian creature with scales that rattled when he moved, spoke up. What are our odds of survival? Sarah looked at the numbers again. If we do nothing different, maybe 30%. The power grid will fail in about 8 hours, which means no heat, no air recycling, and no water purification. The crew exchanged glances. Sarah could see fear in their alien faces, but also something else. Determination. What do we need to do? Zethkar asked. We need to reduce power consumption by 60% while maintaining life support. That means shutting down everything non-essential, rationing food and water, and finding ways to generate additional heat without overloading the electrical systems. An engineer from the back of the group raised a hand. What about our ship? The main power core is damaged, but some of our backup systems might still function. We could try to link them to your station's grid. Sarah shook her head. Too risky. If your damaged systems cause a feedback surge, we lose everything, but... She paused, an idea forming. What about your ship's thermal mass? If we can create a sealed connection between the station and your ship, we might be able to use the ship's hull as a heat sink and thermal regulator. The engineer's eyes lit up. That could work. We'd need to modify both your airlock systems and ours, but it's possible. How long would it take? Sarah asked. 4 hours, maybe 5. Sarah checked her chronometer. That would put them right at the edge of the power grid's limits. We'll have to work in shifts to conserve oxygen. Half the crew works while the other half goes into medical hibernation to reduce resource consumption. Veltar nodded. I can induce temporary hibernation in most species. It will slow their metabolism to about 20% of normal. As the crew began organizing work details, Sarah pulled Zethkar aside. Captain, I need to ask you something. Your ship's sabotage. Was it really because you questioned Council policy toward humans? Zethkar's skin color shifted again. Doctor, there's something you should know. The sabotage wasn't random. My ship was carrying classified documents about Council plans for human colonies. They don't just want to abandon your people. They want to ensure you never become a threat. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. What kind of plans? Biological weapons designed to look like natural plagues, asteroid impacts that would appear to be accidents, ways to eliminate human colonies without it looking like genocide. Zethkar's 4 hands clenched into fists. When I discovered these documents, I couldn't stay silent. I tried to bring them to the Council's Ethics Committee, and they tried to kill you for it. They tried to kill me for it, he confirmed. The explosion that damaged our heating systems also destroyed the evidence I was carrying. But I remember enough to testify, if I live long enough to reach a neutral world. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. This alien captain had risked everything to try to warn humanity about genocide plans, and now both of their species wanted them dead. Captain, she said finally, I think we need to do more than just survive this storm. What do you mean? I mean that if we make it through this, we need to make sure the galaxy knows what the Council is really planning. Humans and aliens like your crew need to work together, or we're all going to end up frozen on worlds like this one. Zethkar extended one of his hands toward her. Doctor, if we survive the next 12 hours, I pledge that my crew and I will help you expose the Council's crimes. Sarah shook his hand, noting how cold his skin was despite the thermal gear. Then let's make sure we survive. We've got work to do. Outside, the storm howled with renewed fury, but inside Research Station Omega, humans and aliens began working together with a shared purpose that went far beyond mere survival. The first challenge came sooner than expected. While the engineering teams worked to connect the ship's thermal systems to the station, the power grid experienced its first major fluctuation. Sarah was in the middle of showing Veltar how to operate the medical hibernation equipment when all the lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in 30 seconds later, bathing everything in dim red light. Sarah's tablet showed the damage immediately. They'd lost 40% more power than calculated, and they'd lost it 3 hours early. Status report, Zethkar called over the station's intercom. Power grid is failing faster than expected, Sarah replied, her fingers flying over the emergency controls. We've got maybe 4 hours before complete failure, not 8. The alien engineer she'd been working with, a mantis-like creature named Kixtor, emerged from the access tunnel between the ship and station. His compound eyes were dark with worry. The connection is only half complete. We need at least 2 more hours. Sarah felt the familiar calm that came over her during emergencies. It was a trait that had kept her alive on a dozen hostile worlds, the ability to think clearly when everything was falling apart. Then we changed the plan. What can we do in the next hour to buy us more time? Kixtor's antennae twitched as he calculated. We could bypass the station's main heating grid and redirect all power to life support only. But that would mean no heat except body warmth. How cold would it get? Zethkar asked. Sarah checked the environmental readings. Inside the station, maybe -20°C. That's survivable for humans in thermal gear for a few hours, but I don't know about your crew. Most of our species can handle short-term cold exposure, Veltar said from the medical bay. But the 3 crew members I've treated for hypothermia won't survive another drop in temperature. Then we keep them warm, Sarah said simply. We create a small heated zone using just essential power and pack everyone else in there. She pulled up the station's layout on her tablet. The main lab has the best insulation and it's the smallest enclosed space. If we shut down everything except minimal life support and heating for that one room, we might be able to maintain survivable temperatures. One of the younger aliens, barely more than a juvenile by the look of him, spoke up. But doctor, that room can't fit all of us. Sarah smiled grimly. Then we get creative about how we fit. For the next hour, the mixed crew worked with an efficiency that surprised everyone. The aliens followed Sarah's instructions without question, and she found herself impressed by their problem-solving abilities. When the lab's furniture couldn't be moved quickly enough through the narrow corridors, Kixtor simply disassembled it with his natural cutting appendages and reassembled it in the corridor. When they discovered that the heating unit for the lab was located in an area that would soon lose power, Veltar jury-rigged a heat exchanger using medical equipment and spare parts from both the station and the ship. But it was the young alien who surprised Sarah the most. His name was Tejrun, and he belonged to a species she didn't recognize. Small, furry, with large eyes adapted for low light. When Sarah mentioned that they needed better insulation for the lab, he disappeared for 20 minutes and returned with what looked like metallic blankets. Emergency thermal wraps from our ship, he explained. They're designed to reflect body heat. If we line the walls of the lab with them, it should improve heat retention by about 30%. That's brilliant, Sarah said and meant it. How did you think of that? Tejrun's fur fluffed with what she guessed was embarrassment. My family runs a shelter on my homeworld. We help refugees who arrive with nothing. You learn to make small spaces warm when resources are limited. As they worked, Sarah began to understand why Zethkar had questioned the Council's assessment of different species. These aliens weren't the arrogant, helpless officials she'd dealt with in formal settings. They were engineers and doctors and ordinary people trying to survive, just like humans. The real test came when they had to implement their plan. 18 beings crammed into a space designed for maybe 6, with only enough power to maintain minimal heating. Sarah had calculated that they'd have enough oxygen if they kept physical activity to a minimum, but calculations didn't account for fear and stress. Everyone needs to control their breathing, she announced as they settled into the cramped lab. Slow, steady breaths. Try to sleep if you can. The more we move around, the faster we use up oxygen. Zethkar positioned himself near the door, clearly taking on a protective role. Doctor, you should rest. You've been awake longer than any of us. I'll rest when the storm passes, Sarah replied, but she was grateful when Veltar appeared with a medical scanner. Your stress hormones are dangerously elevated, the alien doctor said quietly. If you collapse, we all die. Please let me give you something to help you relax. Sarah started to refuse, then realized she was being stupid. Nothing that will impair my judgment, just something to help me sleep for a few hours. The injection was surprisingly gentle, and within minutes Sarah felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. As she drifted towards sleep, she became aware of something unexpected. Someone was singing. It was Tejrun, his voice barely above a whisper, singing something in his native language. The melody was haunting and beautiful and somehow soothing despite the fact that she couldn't understand the words. It's a song my grandmother taught me, he explained when he noticed her listening. It's about finding warmth in cold places and light in dark times. It's beautiful, Sarah murmured. She sang it to refugees who had lost everything. She said music was the one thing that couldn't be taken away, no matter how little you had left. As Sarah fell asleep, she heard other voices joining in. Zethkar humming a harmony in his deeper tones, Veltar adding a rhythmic clicking that somehow fit perfectly with the melody. Even crew members from species she'd never encountered before found ways to contribute to the song. She woke 4 hours later to find that the power grid had held, barely. More importantly, the connection between the ship and station was complete. Kixtor and his engineering team had worked through the night, and now thermal readings showed that the combined system was actually more efficient than either the ship or station had been alone. Status report, she said, stretching cramped muscles. Storm is weakening, Zethkar reported. We should be able to restore full power within the hour. Sarah looked around the cramped lab at the mixed group of humans and aliens who had worked together to survive the night. They were exhausted, cold, and probably still in danger, but there was something different about them now. Something that hadn't been there when the Silent Dawn first landed. "Captain," she said, "I think we've proven something important here." "What's that, Doctor?" "That when the situation is desperate enough, species differences don't matter. What matters is whether people are willing to work together and help each other survive." Zethkar's skin shifted to a warm gold color that she was beginning to recognize as contentment. "I think the galaxy needs to learn that lesson, Doctor. And I think we're the ones who need to teach it." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to break, and through the small porthole, Sarah could see the first hints of dawn on the horizon. 3 days after the storm ended, Sarah discovered that surviving the night had been the easy part. As she worked to restore the station's full systems, Zethkar approached her with news that made her stomach drop. "Doctor, we've been monitoring Council communications. There's a fleet heading this way." Sarah looked up from the power coupling she'd been repairing. "How long do we have?" 2 days, maybe less. It's a full battle group, 6 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. They're not coming to rescue us." Sarah set down her tools and followed Zethkar to the communications array. The intercepted transmissions made for grim reading. The Council had classified both the Silent Dawn and Research Station Omega as compromised assets, to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. "They're not even pretending this is an accident," she said, scrolling through the tactical orders. "They're planning to glass this entire moon and claim it was a reactor malfunction." Veltar joined them, his feathers ruffled with agitation. "I've been treating our injured crew members, but they're sharing stories about what they've seen on other worlds. Doctor, the Council's actions against humanity aren't random. There's a pattern." Sarah pulled up a star chart on her tablet. "What kind of pattern?" "Every human colony that's been abandoned or suffered accidents has been located near strategic resources or jump routes. The Council isn't just trying to eliminate humanity. They're trying to take over human-controlled space." The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind like a lock opening. That's why they classified humans as too primitive for full membership. They needed an excuse to seize our territories without it looking like conquest. Zethkar's skin color shifted to an angry deep purple. "My ship was carrying evidence of this conspiracy when we were sabotaged. Financial records, military deployment orders, even biological weapons specifications designed to target human DNA." "Do you remember any details?" Sarah asked. "Enough. I have what humans call a photographic memory. But remembering won't help us if we're dead in 2 days." Sarah stood and walked to the porthole overlooking the maintenance bay where the Silent Dawn sat connected to her station. The ship was damaged, but Kickstor had been working around the clock to repair critical systems. "What's the status of your ship's weapons and engines?" "Engines are at about 60% capacity," Zethkar replied. "Weapons systems are completely offline. We couldn't fight a shuttle, let alone a battle fleet." "What about your ship's data storage? Any chance you could recover some of those files that were supposed to be destroyed?" Kickstor's antennae twitched as he considered the question. "Possible. The sabotage focused on our main computer core, but there are backup systems throughout the ship. If I could access them without triggering any remaining sabotage protocols, how long would that take?" 12 hours, maybe more. "But Doctor, even if we recover the evidence, how do we get it to someone who can act on it? The Council controls all the major communication networks." Sarah smiled for the first time in days. "Leave that to me. Humans have been dealing with hostile communication networks for centuries. Over the next 18 hours, the makeshift crew worked with desperate efficiency, while Kickstor and his engineering team dug into the ship's backup systems. Sarah set up something the aliens had never seen before: a guerrilla broadcasting station. "The Council controls the official networks," she explained to Tegeron, who was helping her modify the station's communication array. "But they can't control every relay satellite, every merchant ship, every independent communication node in the galaxy. If we broadcast on enough frequencies simultaneously, some of our signals will get through." "But won't the approaching fleet detect our transmissions?" "Absolutely. But by the time they reach us, it'll be too late to stop the information from spreading." Veltar approached with a datapad full of medical records. "Doctor, I've compiled evidence from my own experience. Medical supplies being diverted from human colonies, falsified death certificates, biological samples being collected under false pretenses. If this conspiracy is real, the medical community has been complicit. You're willing to testify to that?" Sarah asked. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stop genocide, Veltar replied firmly. By the second day, they had assembled something unprecedented. A comprehensive dossier of evidence documenting the Council's conspiracy against humanity, corroborated by witnesses from multiple species. Zethkar had recovered financial records showing payments to sabotage crews. Kickstor had found deployment orders for fleets positioned to look like they were fighting pirates, while actually targeting human shipping. Veltar had medical evidence of biological weapons testing, but it was Tejerun who provided the most damning evidence of all. Doctor, I need to tell you something about my family's refugee shelter, he said quietly as they prepared the final broadcast package. We don't just help refugees. We help beings who are fleeing Council persecution, political dissidents, species representatives who voted against Council policies, scientists who discovered inconvenient truths. How many people are we talking about? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands across dozens of worlds. And they all tell similar stories. The Council eliminates problems by eliminating the people who cause them. Sarah stared at him. You're telling me there's already a resistance network? Not organized, not coordinated. But yes, there are beings throughout the galaxy who know the Council is corrupt and would act if they had proof and leadership. That changed everything. Sarah wasn't just broadcasting evidence to random recipients, she was broadcasting to a network of potential allies who were already primed to believe and act on what they received. As the Council fleet approached detection range, Sarah made her final preparations. The broadcast package was ready, the transmission array was configured, and every crew member knew their role. Captain, she said to Zethkar, I need to ask you one more time. Are you sure about this? Once we transmit this information, there's no going back. You'll be marked as a traitor by the Council forever. Zethkar's 4 hands worked steadily at his control station as he replied. Doctor, 3 days ago I believed my government was flawed but fundamentally just. Now I know they're planning genocide against an entire species. The only reason I would have to hesitate is cowardice. And I've learned too much from humans in the past few days to let cowardice guide my decisions. Sarah activated the transmission array, and data began flowing across dozens of frequencies toward hundreds of destinations throughout the galaxy. Evidence of conspiracy, genocide planning, and systematic oppression spread across the communication networks like wildfire. Transmission complete, she announced. The galaxy now knows what the Council really is. On the long-range sensors, the approaching fleet had broken into attack formation. Sarah estimated they had maybe 4 hours before the shooting started. Now comes the hard part, Zethkar said grimly. We have to stay alive long enough for someone to act on what we've sent them. Sarah looked around at the mixed crew of humans and aliens who had risked everything to expose the truth. Then we'd better get creative about survival, because I intend to live long enough to see the Council answer for what they've done. The first energy signatures appeared on the edge of the sensor grid, and Sarah began calculating their extremely limited options for staying alive until help could arrive. The Council fleet arrived with the cold precision of executioners. 7 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already charging as they began. Their approach to Kepler 442b. Sarah watched them through the station's telescopic array and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's perpetual winter. They're not even trying to make this look like an accident, she observed, noting how the ships had positioned themselves to ensure complete destruction of both the station and the Silent Dawn. Admiral Vostar's voice crackled through the communication array, speaking in the formal cadences of Council authority. Attention Research Station Omega and Hegemony Vessel Silent Dawn. You are harboring terrorists and traitors to galactic peace. You have 30 minutes to surrender all personnel for interrogation and justice. Sarah exchanged glances with Zethkar. They both knew what Council justice looked like. Shall I respond? Zethkar asked. Let me, Sarah said, activating the transmitter. Admiral Vossitar, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm curious, when exactly did exposing genocide become terrorism? There was a pause before the Admiral responded. Doctor, you are interfering with lawful Council operations. Surrender immediately and you will be granted a fair trial. Like the fair trials you gave to the colonies you wiped out with engineered plagues, Sarah shot back. Or the fair trials you gave to the scientists who discovered your biological weapons programs. This time the pause was longer. When Vossitar spoke again, his voice was colder. You have made your choice. You have 20 minutes to make peace with whatever deities you believe in. The transmission cut off and Sarah turned to her mixed crew of humans and aliens. Well, that went about as expected. Status Report 1, what do we have to work with? Kixtor looked up from the engineering console he'd been hunched over for the past hour. I've managed to restore partial power to the Silent Dawn's defensive systems, but we have no offensive weapons and our shields can't stop more than a few hits from those cruisers. What about the station's defenses? Tejrun asked. Sarah almost laughed. This is a research station, not a military base. Our heaviest weapon is a mining laser designed for ice cutting. Veltar raised his head from a medical scanner he'd been studying. Doctor, I've been analyzing the biosignatures of the Council fleet. There are humans aboard those ships. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. What? At least 3 of the vessels show human life signs. Prisoners, most likely, being transported for interrogation or elimination. Sarah stared at the medical data, her mind racing. The Council wasn't just coming to kill the witnesses to their crimes. They were bringing evidence of ongoing atrocities with them. How many? She asked quietly. Maybe 50 or 60 humans across the 3 ships. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her stomach. For the past 4 days, she'd been thinking in terms of survival and escape. But those humans on the Council ships didn't have the luxury of escape. They were already dead unless someone acted. Change of plans, she announced, surprising everyone, including herself. We're not running and we're not hiding. Doctor, Zethkar said carefully, we have 1 partially functional ship and a research station against 7 Council warships. That's not bravery, that's suicide. Maybe, but there are 60 humans on those ships who are counting on people like us to act when action seems impossible. Sarah pulled up the tactical display and began highlighting key points on the enemy formation. Besides, we have advantages they don't know about. Such as? Kixtor asked. We know this system better than they do. We know the weather patterns, the asteroid fields, the gravitational anomalies, and most importantly, we know they're overconfident. Sarah's fingers danced across her tablet, pulling up geological surveys and meteorological data she'd collected over 3 months of isolation on this frozen world. The storm that hit us 3 days ago wasn't random. This planet has a highly unstable magnetic field that creates predictable but violent weather patterns. Another massive storm is building right now, and it's going to be bigger than the last one. She highlighted a section of the data showing electromagnetic readings. During these storms, the magnetic interference makes long-range communications impossible and severely degrades targeting systems. If we can draw the Council fleet into the storm, they'll lose their coordination and accuracy advantages, Zethkar finished, his skin shifting to an interested gold color. But we'll be just as blind as they are. No, we won't, because we'll be expecting it and we have something they don't have. What's that? Tejrun asked. Sarah smiled grimly. Desperation and superior knowledge of the local conditions. Plus, I've been thinking about that mining laser. For the next 15 minutes, Sarah outlined a plan that made everyone in the room question her sanity. It involved using the research station's mining equipment to trigger an avalanche that would force the Council ships to reposition, flying the damaged Silent Dawn directly into the heart of an electromagnetic storm that would blind both sides, and using the station's geological survey equipment to navigate by reading underground metal deposits instead of relying on ship sensors. This plan has about a dozen ways it could kill us all, Veltar observed. Yes, Sarah agreed. But it also has one way we might save 60 innocent people and expose the Council's crimes to the galaxy. Zethkar studied the tactical display for a long moment. Doctor, if we attempt this, my crew will follow your orders without question. But I need to know, is this about saving those prisoners or is this about revenge for what the Council did to humanity? Sarah considered the question seriously. Both. But mostly it's about proving that humans don't abandon people who need help, even when helping them is impossible. The captain's 4 hands moved to his control console. Then let's show the galaxy what impossible looks like. The first phase of the plan worked perfectly. Sarah used the station's mining laser to trigger a massive ice avalanche that forced the Council fleet to alter their approach vector. As the ships moved to avoid the falling ice and debris, they spread out their formation and moved closer to the planet's magnetic anomaly zones. The second phase required splitting up. While Zethkar took the Silent Dawn on what appeared to be a desperate escape run toward the outer system, Sarah remained on the station with Kixtor and Tejrun, to implement the most dangerous part of the plan. "Are you sure about this, Doctor?" Tedrin asked as they prepared to overload the station's power grid. "No," Sarah admitted, "but sometimes being sure is a luxury you can't afford." She activated the overload sequence. And research station. Omega began building toward a controlled explosion that would create enough electromagnetic interference to blind every sensor in the system for exactly 17 minutes. Through the communications array, she could hear Admiral Vostar ordering his ships to pursue the Silent Dawn and destroy it before it could escape. The Council ships moved into perfect position, their weapons charging for the killing blow. Sarah looked at her chronometer. 15 seconds until the station's power core reached critical overload. "This is either going to work," she said to her alien companions, "or we're about to become the shortest footnote in galactic history." The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. The silence after the explosion was deafening. Sarah found herself floating in the emergency pod she'd barely managed to reach before the station's power core overloaded. Through the small porthole, she could see the twisted remains of Research Station Omega, drifting among chunks of ice and debris. The electromagnetic pulse had worked exactly as calculated. But whether anyone had survived to benefit from it was another question entirely. Her emergency beacon crackled to life, and she heard the most beautiful sound in the universe. Zethkar's voice, strained but alive. "Dr. Chen, please respond if you can hear this. I'm here, Captain. Status report. Tedrin and Kickstor are safe in their own emergency pods. The station's destruction created the electromagnetic interference we needed, but the effects are already fading. We have maybe 10 minutes before the Council ships restore full sensor capability." 10 minutes. Sarah activated her pod's maneuvering thrusters and began moving toward the coordinates where Zethkar had been forced to abandon the Silent Dawn. Around her, the debris field from the station's explosion provided perfect cover for small craft. But it wouldn't hide them for long, Captain. "What's the status of those human prisoners?" "That's the good news, Doctor. When the electromagnetic pulse hit the Council fleet, it disabled their security systems. The humans aboard the ships have managed to break out of their holding areas and are fighting to take control of at least 2 vessels." Sarah felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with species, loyalty, and everything to do with human ingenuity. Even as prisoners facing execution, humans had been watching for opportunities to fight back. "Any word from our broadcast? Has anyone received the evidence we transmitted? That's where things get interesting." Zethkar's voice carried a note of amazement. "We're receiving responses from across the galaxy. Tedrin was right about there being a resistance network. Dozens of worlds are declaring independence from the Council, and several species are demanding emergency sessions of the Galactic Assembly." As Sarah maneuvered through the debris field, she began picking up radio transmissions from the chaos around them. The Council fleet was in disarray with 2 ships reporting mutinies, 1 ship completely dark after an internal explosion, and the remaining vessels struggling to coordinate without their electronic systems. But it was Admiral Vostar's increasingly desperate communications that told the real story. "All Council vessels, maintain formation and continue the mission. The terrorist base has been destroyed, but we must ensure no witnesses survive." "Admiral," came a response from one of the cruiser captains. "We're receiving priority communications from Council headquarters. They're ordering us to stand down and return for emergency consultations." "Ignore those orders," Vostar snapped. "They're clearly compromised transmissions from the terrorist network." Sarah smiled grimly as she listened. The evidence they'd broadcast was working its way through the galactic communication networks faster than the Council could contain it. But Vossitar was clearly willing to complete his mission regardless of orders from his superiors. That made him dangerous in a way that went beyond military firepower. "Captain Zethkar," she transmitted. "The Admiral isn't going to give up just because his government is calling him home. We need to end this here and now. Doctor, I'm open to suggestions, but we're in escape pods and emergency shuttles. Our total firepower amounts to a few hand weapons." Sarah looked out at the chaos around them and began to see possibilities. "Captain, what's the status of the ship that went dark? The one that had the internal explosion?" "The Relentless Tide. It appears to be drifting with no power and no communications." "Why?" "Because if there are human prisoners aboard that ship, they might have just taken control of a Council heavy cruiser." For the next 5 minutes, Sarah guided her emergency pod toward the drifting Council vessel. using debris for cover while monitoring radio transmissions. What she heard convinced her that her guess was correct. "This is Colonel James Morrison, Earth Defense Force," came a transmission on a frequency the Council rarely monitored. "To any human or allied forces receiving this, we have taken control of the Council ship Relentless Tide. We are combat capable but need technical assistance to operate alien systems." Sarah nearly shouted with relief. Morrison was a name she recognized. From the Colonial Defense Networks, a career military officer who'd been reported killed in action 6 months ago during a pirate attack on the Tau Ceti colony. "Colonel Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I have technical specialists who can help you. Are you able to receive boarding parties?" "Dr. Chen, we heard your broadcast. Excellent work exposing these bastards. Yes, we can receive boarding parties, but make it fast. Admiral Vostar is reforming his fleet and moving to attack position." As Zethkar's damaged shuttle and the emergency pods converged on the Relentless Tide, Sarah found herself coordinating the most unlikely military operation in galactic history. Alien engineers working alongside human soldiers to turn captured Council technology against its former owners. Kixtor proved invaluable in explaining the ship's weapon systems to Colonel Morrison's people, while Veltar helped treat both human and alien injuries sustained during the capture of the vessel. Tejran, despite his youth and small size, turned out to have an intuitive understanding of Council navigation systems that impressed even the professional soldiers. "Doctor," Colonel Morrison said as they took positions on the Relentless Tide's bridge, "I need you to know that there are more prisoners on the other Council ships. If we're going to do this, we need to save all of them." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing Admiral Vossitar's remaining ships moving into attack formation. They still had overwhelming firepower advantage, but they'd lost the element of surprise and were operating with damaged systems. "Colonel, how many of your people have experience with ship-to-ship combat?" "About half of us are former military. The others are civilians who've learned to fight the hard way over the past few months." Sarah nodded. "Captain Zethkar, what are the chances the other liberated humans can take control of their ships the way Colonel Morrison's people did?" "Unknown, but if we can create enough confusion and coordinate our attack with their breakout attempts, it might just work," Sarah finished. She activated the ship's communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention human prisoners on Council vessels. This is Dr. Sarah Chen aboard the liberated ship Relentless Tide. If you can hear this, we're about to engage the fleet. Any assistance you can provide from inside their ships would be appreciated." The response came in the form of explosions aboard 2 of the remaining Council vessels as human prisoners. "Sabotaged critical systems from within, Admiral." Vostar's voice cut across the communication channels. Filled with rage and disbelief, "All vessels ignore the internal sabotage and focus fire on the stolen cruiser. Do not let these terrorists escape." "Admiral," Sarah broadcast back, "we're not terrorists and we're not trying to escape. We're here to arrest you for crimes against sentient life. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. A single captured Council cruiser, crewed by rescued prisoners and alien defectors, fighting a running engagement against 4 heavy warships while coordinating with saboteurs aboard the enemy vessels. It shouldn't have worked. By every tactical manual in the galaxy, Admiral Vostar's fleet should have destroyed the Relentless Tide in minutes, but the Admiral had made the same mistake the Council had been making for years. He'd underestimated human adaptability and the power of diverse species working together toward a common goal. When the final Council vessel surrendered 3 hours later, Admiral Vossitar's last transmission was a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice defeated, "I don't understand how you did this." Sarah looked around the bridge at the mixed crew of humans and aliens who had just accomplished the impossible. "Admiral," she replied, "that's exactly why you lost.